Okay, today is January 7th, 2023, and it's a gigantic honor to have Sekou Odinga on the show. Sekou is someone I've long admired and looked up to for his work, dedication, sacrifice, and just for the person and example he has been and continues to be to so many. Sekou is someone that has dedicated his entire life from youth to present to the liberation movement. Sekou is a veteran of the Black Panther Party here in New York City. Sekou was the first Bronx section leader and a founding member of the international section of the Black Panther Party. Sekou was also a veteran of Black Liberation Army and paid one of the highest prices, spending 33 years in prison as a political prisoner, or more accurately, a prisoner of war, in direct retaliation for his activism. Sekou continues to educate, organize, and struggle for the freedom of oppressed people domestically and all over the world, and is someone who has always been a prominent and stalwart advocate in the struggle for the freedom of political prisoners. I could go on, but let's hear directly from Sekou. Sekou, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's an honor to have you on the show, and welcome to the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So just to start from the beginning, where were you born?
In New York, right here in New York, Queens, New York, Jamaica.
Okay, and what year were you born?
44, 1944.
And where were your parents from?
Both of them are from the South. My mother's from Georgia, my father's from Mississippi.
Okay, and what was growing up in Jamaica, Queens like at that time? I'm guessing in the 1950s, for instance, in that area.
I heard the first part of it.
What was growing up in Queens like in the 1950s, and just generally, and what was it like growing up for you?
I don't know. I guess it was. I mean, as a kid, I always felt like I was normal, regular. Jamaica, Queens at that time was pretty much like it is now. Working class neighborhood. When I first, as a very young boy, I was the neighborhood was more mixed. It was, I guess you could say, we were gentrifying the neighborhood. Blacks was moving in, and it was already a predominantly white community when we moved there. I think we were one of two families on the black families on the block, three, one across the street. So it was mostly white folks, but it was fast. As we moved in, I think a lot of other blacks started moving in the area also. So pretty much it was a good neighborhood as far. I mean, I always felt like I had a real, even today, I feel like I had a pretty privileged youth. I mean, we were poor, but not real poor. You know, my father was an whatever you call him. He was a businessman, you know, and he started his own business, even though he was an uneducated man. He only had a third, fourth grade education. But he kind of taught himself how to read and write and learn how to do the math that it was necessary to have to run a business. Mostly my mother did a lot of that type of work for him as he built his business. He was he was in the fuel business, coal. So ice, coal, wood, kerosene, mostly coal, though that was the backbone of his business. The business was called A. Burns Ice and Coal Business. So coal was really the backbone of the business.
And coal at that time was used for heating homes, I'm guessing, or coal at that time was used. The coal he was selling was selling for people to heat their homes.
Yeah, heat their homes, hot water, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And most of the houses in the 30s, 40s, 50s in that area of Queens were coal furnaces. You know, so we had a coal furnace in our house also.
And I recall hearing you discuss in another interview that there was an interaction between your father and the police. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I guess when I was about 11, 10, 11 or 12, something right in that age. My father, like I say, was a businessman. He had a coal and ice business. One summer, I guess it was the summer of 55, 56, 54. Anyhow, he was delivering ice to a store in one of the areas of South Jamaica. Uh, a small, like, I can't remember if it was a restaurant, like more like a luncheonette type of place. And back in them days, you had soda boxes that you put ice in them to keep the sodas cold. And so he was delivering ice to the store. As he got out, as he was taking the ice off the truck, a policeman walked up to him, and he was parked close to water hydrant or something that made it no parking. And police walked up to him as he was getting the ice, as he put the ice on his shoulder, and told him to move the truck. And being a respectful man that he was, he said, "Yes, sir." And 1 minute, and he continued to take the ice on into the store, put it in there, and come back out. And the officer told him, said something to the effect of, "Didn't I tell you to move the truck?"
Mm.
He said, "Yes, yes, I'm getting ready to move it right now. When I tell you to move, you move it. You don't go do nothing else."
Mm.
And they got in a little discussion about that, about how he was in the process of taking the ice in when he told them, etc. Trying to explain, but trying to be respectful at the same time. And I don't think he liked the the effort my father was making to explain, just accept what I'm telling you and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And he, for some crazy reason, he hit him.
Mm.
I guess he felt like he was being disrespectful to him by talking back or whatever, but he hit him. And my father was a relatively big man. He was big. He wasn't just relatively. He was a big man. He was about 6'3". At that time he probably was 250 pounds with no fat on him.
Mm.
Of course, of the work he done, he was in really good shape.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he hit him, instead of him falling, he kind of looked at him. "What are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
And he hit him again. And being as strong as he was, he couldn't seem to knock him down, which was what he was trying to do. So he pulled out his billy club and went to work.
Mm.
And they beat him up real bad,
Mm.
real bad. And so he wind up having to go to the hospital. Face was all swollen up, and you know, so that's basically what happened.
And how did that impact you, or did it impact you?
Well, I was already not a great fan of the police. I had not seen nothing that made me no fan of it. And listening to my older brothers talk about them,
Mm-hmm.
I was already not a fan of them. But this actually turned me against them.
Mm-hmm.
Really, this was like, these are some unjust people. People that couldn't trust. You know, they could kill you, they could brutalize you, and get away with it. My father, he didn't fight back,
Mm-hmm.
which bothered me. That really bothered me because my father was a disciplinary in our house.
Mm-hmm.
So, me and my brothers often got ass whipping by him,
Mm-hmm.
and yet he let these guys beat him up without any response. Uh, with the explanation we got was that there were other ways to deal with it,
Mm-hmm.
and taking them to the court and letting the law take care of them was one of the ways. So he sued them
Mm-hmm.
and won the suit. Well, back then he didn't get no real money, a couple $1,000,
Mm-hmm.
but he felt like he had been, uh, what's the word?
Vindicated. Or...
He had received a semblance of justice
Mm-hmm.
by winning the case and getting a few $1,000s that he got. And so he went on with it, but it always kind of played bad in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
from both sides, from him not fighting back to them brutalizing a man that wouldn't fight back.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really a bad, a bad memory for me, or experience for me as a young man, as a young child, actually.
Mm-hmm. And how about the murder of Emmett Till um, impact you at all?
Very strongly. That was another one of those moments. That one was probably even worse than my father.
Hmm.
That Jet magazine, seeing what they did to a child that was, pretty much my age. He was only like, I guess, 2 years older than me. This happened at 55, if I remember right. I would have been 11. He was 13.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, wow, these are some beastly people. But it wasn't just police, even though we thought of it as the sheriff being involved in it also, from all that I was hearing and understanding from at that time, because it was much talked about, especially in the black community. And my family talked to my mother, fathers, people there, other adults around them. They talked a lot about it. And so it wasn't just law enforcement, it was white folks.
Mm-hmm.
It was, this is what white folks could do to you and get away with it. I had been called the N word growing up in the neighborhood I did. Like I said, when we moved in there, it was predominantly white,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't universally liked and accepted. Black people moving in that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there were many who really hated it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had our little run-in, racial run-ins, little fights among the kids, you know. So we had been already prepped by moms and taught by her, that some people might call you out of your name. Some white people might call you out of your name. Don't come down to their level.
Mm-hmm.
Walk away, let it go. Their ignorance is their ignorance. That's their problem. Don't let that become your problem.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. And so, but of course, being kids, we didn't always accept it.
Mm-hmm.
We had our little fights, in the neighborhood. But then we had kids in the neighborhood, white kids in the neighborhood that we got along with, that we played with, that we played ball with them. I went to school with them. In the neighborhood, we played stick ball, we played baseball in the parks, we played touch football and basketball. So we did all of that. And being it was a mixed neighborhood, predominantly white early on, uh, we was always some whites around.
Mm-hmm.
My father had his business not far from there, and we spent a lot of time. We being the boys of my family spent a lot of time at there, and uh, mostly in that area too was mostly white, and we got to know all the white kids around there. They hung out and did their things right there because we were right there in the neighborhood. We all lived in the neighborhood. So, but as far as Emmett Till, it was a tremendous. It had a tremendous negative effect on me.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it was. Even now, as I think about it, it was a horrible thing. I mean, I believe if I remember correctly, when I first seen it, I cried. It was like, wow, how could they do something like that to a kid?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it had a real negative effect on
And in terms of schooling, you went to public schools.
public schools.
Mm-hmm. And what was that experience like?
Well, I guess it, it wasn't that good. I, early on, I took a disliking to school. Uh, One of the problems probably was what should have played in my favor, might have played against me, was that my older sister, who was right above me, went to school obviously a year or so before me, and started teaching me everything she was learning.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I come into school, you know, I was a little ahead. I already knew my ABCs. I could already read a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of in front of most students.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess that played to my boredom in school.
Mm-hmm.
That I could do my work quickly and then there was nothing to do but to
Mm-hmm.
play.
Mm-hmm.
And the teachers didn't have it. Their thing was basically, especially for black kids, discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the main thing. More than being smart, they wanted you to be disciplined,
Mm-hmm.
And so I was always getting problems, catching problems for my lack of what they would call discipline.
And did there come a time where you got kicked out of school or anything of that nature?
Yeah, I got kicked out of school more than once. Eventually, completely, but yeah, when I was in the sixth grade, no, seventh grade, I got I had got to a point where I was playing hooky a lot. Not playing hooky means not going to school,
Mm-hmm.
not going to school, taking off, and so I got left behind on in the seventh grade, and the second year of the seventh grade was worse than the first year.
Mm-hmm.
I was still not going to school every chance I got, but I guess I was becoming more disrespectful also.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers couldn't say too much to me. So they put me in what they call in New York a 600 school back
Mm-hmm.
then. 611, 613, 621, different. But all the 600 school was basically for quote unquote the bad kids,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that couldn't be controlled in the public schools. one of the one of the criteria of them accepting you in the school I went to was that the parents had to accept corporal punishment. They had to agree to corporal punishment if the child got out of broke their rules, whatever the rules were. And so I wound up in a 611 school. Yeah. And because, again, they didn't care that much, it didn't look like about, well, not that they didn't care. Most everybody else in the school that I was in were behind. Of course, we were the bad kids. We were the kids that didn't do our work in the regular schools. And so, but again, I was in, this time it played to my favor. And the work came real easy to me. So I kind of breezed through it. I got disciplined once or twice, but not often because I learned early on that you couldn't beat them. They wouldn't. They didn't. They actually seemed to have a pleasure, take a pleasure if you would fight back. That's what they would. They had a crew of them in there that they would hope you fight back so they could brutalize you, and they would brutalize you. So once I seen that once or twice with bigger kids a little bigger than me, that thought they were tough, and some of them were tough. In the streets, they were tough, but they wasn't nothing for them big old teachers, And it was about four of them. They would come together, and they would do you up real bad if you tried. I seen them beat up kids real bad. I can remember one white boy and a big old kid. I was a regular size. I was a little taller than most, but I was pretty much regular size. This kid was a big kid. And he must have had been left back more than once or twice because he looked like he must have been. When most of us was like 12, 13, 14, he looked like he was 16, 17. And he basically, when they told him to do something, he said, F you. They said, oh, you're a tough one, honey. F you again. So they call a squad down there. We want to see you be as tough now. When we get you upstairs as you are now, I ain't going nowhere. No. Boom! He fought back best he could. That's what they loved. They enjoyed it. They beat him down, drug him upstairs to the room where they usually beat you down at. And all you could hear was hollering and screaming. They dogged the kid out real bad. And he come back the next day all swole up. And I don't know what happened to him because in my mind I can't remember him graduating with us. So he probably just quit because he probably was old enough to quit. At 16 you could quit. Anyhow, they dogged him out really bad. So I kind of made up my mind. Now that ain't gonna happen to me. I ain't gonna. I don't want to do everything they say, but since it's easy enough to do what they say, it's easier than taking that ass with it. And since my parents had already given permission, he didn't give them permission. None of the parents, I don't think, gave them permission to brutalize us like they did. What they tell them what they would do is that they would hit you once or twice on the backside with a ruler. And they did that too. And some of them did that. It was only when you kind of resisted that they really brutalized you. So most of mine was that type of the once or twice that they did brutalize me was like that. You gotta bend over the desk. They had these long like pointers. I think the teachers would use them to point the stuff on the blackboard, long wooden pointers, round, thin, and they would hit you on the ass with them, as hard as they could. It hurt, but me being disciplined by my father, corporal punishment wasn't nothing new to me. So 3 licks, 4 licks like that, I could take it. But I didn't take it often because I didn't. Actually, I become one of the teacher's favorite because I knew most of the work. Reading. Almost none of the kids. I think it was only 2 of us that was up to our level, our class level. Like I think I went there in the 7th, and they quickly put me in the 8th, which was everybody else in the class was like reading 6th grade level, 5th grade level.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to read 7th, 8th grade level, he was kind of way ahead anyhow. So I was kind of way ahead. And I graduated the next year, from the 9th grade. You go from 9th to 10th.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
My dad, who grew up in the Bronx, I think he's 3 years older than you. He talks about how they used to give noogies.
Get what?
Noogies.
Nookies?
Noogies. I think it's something like this that they do on your head. They used to give.
Oh, like this here.
Yeah. They used to give
Yeah.
noogies. If you misbehaved in school, you would get a noogie.
Yeah, well, in some schools they just regularly, like in the school I was in, they didn't do that unless unless you was in a school like I was in too, 611 school. But I was told that the Catholic schools regularly discipline the kids, but we didn't go to Catholic school, even though there was a Catholic school around the corner from us. We went to the public school. So.
And then
and being in the public school system, they had a thing in the regular public schools. They wasn't supposed to hit you.
Mm-hmm.
It was only when you went to the 600 schools where they had asked you for the permission and told you what they were going to do, and you had agreed to it. You being your parents, obviously.
And then when you, as you got older into your teenage years, what was life like outside of school?
Well, I guess could have been described as a hoodlum. I hung out in the streets with the other hoodlums, getting in trouble, doing nothing real bad, but having our little fights with the other hoodlums on the other side of town, doing little thievery in the stores, going in the stores and snatching what you wanted and running out. I remember we had what we used to call the push cart. It was like an open fruit market where they had push carts stacked one right behind the other with all kinds of fruits, fresh fruits every day. That was one of our favorite places to walk by, snatch stuff and then run. But getting into those kind of troubles, I can remember I wasn't breaking rules. I ran away from home a few times where instead of coming home and taking the ass whipping, I said, I'm not going. I'll stay out as long as I can, and I'll take the ass whipping when I do get home.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't a good child.
Mm-hmm.
I was as a teenager. By the time I turned 12, 13, in school they kind of made me toe the line, but once I got out of school and there wasn't no teacher or parent above me,
mm-hmm.
I ran wild, I guess. I got into a lot of little troubles.
And did you ever get into trouble with the police as a teenager?
Well, police was always there to harass us. I mean, that's how I thought of them. We hung out on a block not far from my house. They had a pool room on one end of the block and a liquor store on the other end. And between the two spots, the older brothers would be there, so we'd be around them. I started smoking weed at an early age. Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Police was always be standing on the corner singing or playing with each other. The police come by, get up against the wall, they search you. If somebody had a knife on them, they'd take them in and give them what they used to call, I forget what kind of youthful offender card or some kind of card they used to give you. It was like a juvenile delinquent card almost,
Mm-hmm.
If you was under 16, they basically, they might beat you up a little bit, smack you around, hit you upside the head with the blackjack and a book they put upside. They take a what they call it, a telephone book. These say them thick telephone books, and they'll put them up next to your head and hit them. And it would knock you out, but it wouldn't leave no scars. You'd be just dogged out. Yeah, so I mean, so we was always coming into contact with the police. It was a regular 103rd precinct was notorious in that area.
And at some point, you ended up in Comstock. Do you recall how old you were and what the circumstances?
I was 16 when I went to Comstock.
And when I think of Comstock, I think of an adult facility.
Huh?
When I think of Comstock, I think of an adult facility.
Well, it is and it ain't.
Mm-hmm.
When I first went, they had just changed it. I think in 1960, they had changed the status of it from state prison to correctional institute. And as a correctional institute, if you was under 21, you could go there. You wasn't supposed to go to state prisons under 21 in New York at that time. And so I was wilding one night with a couple of friends. We was robbing people, robbing stores, just wilding, really. Just we wasn't even counting the money, just going from one place to the other. And we made the mistake of going up in Richmond Hill, white community. And obviously somebody called the police, and they were out in force looking for us. Spotted us. We ran in a car, stolen car. We ran. The brother that was driving, Ronnie Johnson, lost control of the car and ran up on the sidewalk and hit the stoops and jumped off the sidewalk, hit a couple of cars going up. Eventually it came to a stop, and there were guns in our head, move you, effing nigga, blow your black brains out. So, of course, we did what we were told. Wind up going to court. They charged us with armed robbery, having a gun, illegal gun. There were 3 major charges and a bunch of little charges. I think with armed robbery, Sullivan Law, which was the gun, and grand larceny. And so they had the 3 of us in court for that. Our lawyers asked for a Youthful Offender Act. They had what they call a youthful offender back then, that if you were under 19, I guess it was 19 or younger, they would give you what they call a Youthful Offender Act, where they had 2 of them. One you could get 3 years, the other you could get 5 years, but you could, no matter what you had done, you couldn't get no more than that. So the judge, for whatever reason, granted us the Youthful Offender Act, and we got the 3-year act. So we were sent upstate New York. Comstock, like I said, they had just turned into a correctional institute, and it was basically for the incorrigible youth, youth that really they felt like we got to give them more discipline, more security than just in the regular ones. So I was one of them sent to Comstock early on, and it was still a lot of older guys still. They was in the process of moving them out. But, I think after a few of us got up there, a couple of hundred of us got in there. All of them wanted to get out of there then, because we was a bunch of wild young kids, We did all the things we wasn't supposed to do. They tell you don't do. We did them. You know, you're never supposed to take. Uh, if a prisoner gave you something that you didn't know, you don't take it, because that was like a test that if you took it, if they thought they were tougher than you, then you become their victim. Either they want to have sex with you, or they want to make you like a slave. You do whatever they tell you to do. We changed the whole game. If they offer us, we take it, and dare them to come and do something else. You know, so yeah, it was a bunch of wild kids. Got involved in everything we wasn't supposed to do. We did. You know, so. But it was a very racist place. Comstock was. They had no black administrators, no black officers, no black employees, period. Nothing black. And they had a proud Ku Klux Klan in the town that I think it was called Glen Falls. I think that was what it was, Glen Falls. Comstock was in Glen Falls. But anyhow, the Ku Klux Klan was active in the area, and most of the guards were part of it. You know, in fact, I think the Grand Dragon was one of our sergeants in the prison. You know, and back then, I guess they didn't. It was all right to be in the Klan up that way because they have them in the local papers and everything, and it was accepted. You know, so but anyhow, I say all that to say it was a very racist place, very racist. The prison itself separates you. The whites was over here, the Spanish was over here, the blacks was over here, and of course the whites got the best of everything. Like we had 3 baseball fields. The best fields with the grass and all, everything. The best baseball bats, best gloves, all that went to the white guys. You know, the best handball courts, the ones that didn't have no cracks in them. You know, they were smooth. You know, the ground was smooth, the walls were smooth. The best ones went to the white guys. The next best went to the Puerto Ricans and other Hispanics, and the worst went to the blacks. And on down the line, say with the basketball courts and all that. No blacks was allowed to touch food. Couldn't cook it, couldn't serve it, couldn't do nothing. You could work out on the farms to grow it, but you couldn't have nothing to do with the preparation of it. It was just a very racist, openly racist place. And blacks was always talking about not taking it no more, rebelling against it. You know, they were talking about it when I got there. When I got there in '61, I think I got there around early summer '61, and you know, like end of May, somewhere around the end of May. Because if I remember correctly, we got busted around the 1st of April, and took a month or so before going through the courts and all that. You know, maybe close to 2 months. But after that, upstate, and so it must have been around the early part of the summer. Went there, but when I got there, they were already talking about rebelling. They had 2 main groups, black groups. One group we called the Nationalists, who all of them were basically young black men who had been had getting some kind of culture had decided that to be black was a good thing, and to come together as blacks was a good thing. Those were the nationalists. The other ones were the Nation of Islam.
Bless you. Bless you.
And so those were the two that was advocating for the rebellion. We got to stop. If we don't do something, they're going to keep doing everything. They're going to keep treating us like we ain't nothing but slaves, which they were treating us basically like that. I think you got 5 cents, what was it, 5 cents a week or 5 cents a day. I can't remember. I know it was 5 cents.